I'm Dr. Connie Romig, and I'm here to talk to you about sand tray therapy and use of sand tray in therapeutic sessions. Sand tray is not just for kids. It can be used with all ages. The little kids really enjoy just running their hands through the sand and using it as a sensory experience. My grade school kids really like using the miniatures and playing out scenes. My teens like it because I'm not just sitting there asking them how they feel. They're more directed on something outside of us just looking at each other. And sand tray is actually very often used in marital therapy, again, because it's not just sitting around talking about your feelings. It gives people another focus during the session. Sand tray is also very versatile in that it can be used in a non-directive or a directive manner. When I first start working with kids, I introduce them to the sand tray by saying, I have these miniatures, and this is just a fraction of the miniatures that I own in my office. I have tons and tons more. I open up all my doors and my drawers and say, okay, I have all these miniatures. I'd like you to select miniatures that you are drawn to or that you're interested in. And so they take their time, 10 minutes, and they select things that they like. And then I open up the sand tray and say, now I'd like you to create a scene in the sand with the miniatures that you've chosen. So they don't know that that's the end result. And often once they put the miniatures in the sand, they look at it and I had no idea I was going to do that. So it's interesting what they end up developing in the sand tray. And then my job is really just helping them walk through. What's going on over here? What do you think these two characters are saying to each other? If this character could say anything to that character, what would they say? We can do problem solving, we can practice social skills, we can do anger management skills, all kinds of interventions. Once I know a kid, then I can use the sand tray in a directive manner. And so, for example, kiddo might come in and I'll say, gosh, mom told me that you had a really rough week at school last week. How about we make a sand tray about being bullied on the bus? And so we can create that scene and again, work on very specific skills. Once a client uses the sand tray, they tend to come back to it over and over again. And one client that comes to mind, I had a kiddo, he was 6 or 7 when he first started coming in, and his parents were in the middle of a not very nice divorce situation, and he wasn't very talkative, and so I introduced the sand tray, and he got out my army men, and he put one set of army men on this side and one set of men on the army men on this side. Oh, he came in, by the way, with anger management issues. So he sets up the army guys, and not only are they battling, they are flying across the room because that's just how upset and angry he was. And he did that for several sessions over the course of 3 to 6 months. And then he was done. He was done at that time. And then a couple of years later, he's developed a little bit more. I've known this family for a long, long time because I see many of the children in the family for various reasons. But a couple of years later, he's now 10, 11, 12. His brain has developed a little bit. His cognitive understanding of what's going on is a little bit different, but he wants to come back in because he's having struggles with anger management again. And what does he do? He immediately goes to the sand tray, sets up the army guys, and has them battling out, throwing them across the room yet again. So I had another little client who experienced some significant traumas, including a violent death of a parent. And it's not unusual for kids to see all the miniatures, get overwhelmed, and just start dumping everything in the sand tray. And initially, that's what we thought was going on. She was dumping everything in the sand tray, just piles and piles and piles of miniatures. But it was really telling that she created a very coherent, organized story out of this chaos. And it was just a symbol of her resiliency in the face of all the things that she was experiencing at the very young age of 6 or 7. Because most often kids just dump the items in and leave it for us to reorganize. She actually made a story out of the chaos, which was really, really encouraging. not every miniature means the same thing to every client. And while this guy might be an angry bully to one client, another client might really identify with this miniature because he's big and clumsy and not well liked. And so we can never assume anything. We can't assume that because they put a superhero in the sand tray that that superhero is going to save the day. We never know until the client plays out the scene or works out the scene for himself or for herself. And our job is to find the why behind their scenes without asking the question why.